Welcome to the Customer Success from the Ground Up podcast with me, Mike Marshall, Customer Success Leader.
And me, Deborah Knight, founder of CS Consultancy Captive.
Each episode we interview people that have set up customer success from the ground up at their companies.
And we try and have a lot of fun in the process.
We hope you enjoy the next episode. Hello Deb, hello Rohan. How you doing?
Hi guys.
Warm.
Melting yet?
Very hot today, isn't it? It's the hottest. Is it the hottest day? Hottest June day of in 50 years. I read today. It's everyone's sort of baking a little bit in their houses, aren't they? How
I think I saw apparently, like, just to put Gosport on the map, I think we had the highest in the south of like 36.1 degrees or something like that. So yeah, really putting the sleepy town of Gosport on the map, for which it has no right to be. But there we go.
Is it making everyone more sleepier because they're just baking in their houses? I expect. I know everyone feels a bit sort of tired today, but cool. All right. Well, pleasure to have you on. Awesome guest today. I'm very excited to have Rohan Tailor from ABR Talent on our Customer Success from the Ground Up podcast. So, welcome, Rohan. Lovely to see you today. So I've known Rohan, I think Deb has for some time in the customer success space. ABR Talent was one of the leading customer success recruitment talent organisations. So Rohan's been kind enough to be to lead online panels and workshops for our community before. So it was a real pleasure to have him on our podcast to talk all things hiring talent in the sort of customer success startup world. So let's get into it. Rohan, before I kind of hand over to you to introduce yourself, I'll just sort of talk a little bit about your topic. So, obviously, with Rohan's expertise, we're going to talk a bit about the kind of hiring side of things. So, topic today is sort of hiring for customer success, obviously, but really at early stage startups. Really, obviously, we're going to get a recruiter's vantage point today, which is always important. The two sides, I think, what founders get wrong when hiring, and what separates candidates who actually land and sort of succeed in these roles. So I think that's the idea today. So very useful content for everyone in early stage. So I gave you a bit of a sort of boxing ring warm up intro, Rohan, but I'd love you to introduce yourself to the group today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Great to be with you guys. And yeah, so Rohan from ABR, we are one of, maybe the best, customer success recruitment agencies in the UK. So we have the benefit of supporting lots of start and scale up businesses, growing their customer success and parallel GTM functions. Gives us real insight into kind of what the market's doing, where challenges lie, where people are struggling, what the talent market's doing as well, so we can really have perspective as to kind of what's happening the candidate side of the fence and how that can be taken advantage of or how it needs to be approached. So yeah, always keen to share what we're seeing, what we're learning, and hopefully people can take away some good stuff from that, which just makes their life a bit easier and maybe puts us on their map a little bit when they choose to hire.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, we all see it, right? We're all in customer success, and you see it on LinkedIn every day, really, right? There's a lot of reductions in force. There's hundreds of candidates for every role. So I think, especially in customer success, but I think all of tech right now, I think that sort of how to navigate is from a person, an interviewee's perspective is a challenging one. But obviously, for an interviewer, a hiring person, a founder, or it's very challenging as well. Seeing through the haze of AI created CVs and trying to find the good people and the great people who would be a good fit for your role, I think is probably harder now than ever. So I think it's good timing today. Cool. Well, as we always do on the Customer Success from the Ground Up podcast, before we crack on, we're going to have our little section on well that escalate fast, and it's always good fun to go through Reddit forums and find interesting posts from people that are dealing with things in the CS world. So we've got one today from, I always love these Reddit handles, Inside Bus 4927. I wouldn't want to be inside a bus today. It'd be very hot. So I chose this one for, obviously because of your expertise, Rohan. But the title is, I got let go. What should I do? Right. So a common one probably at the moment. I got let go of my very toxic customer success job, which I'm a bit relieved of, but also in shock. I want a job at a more established company. These early stage startups keep changing requirements, don't know how to evaluate your job performance, and tend to promote let's say, incompetent leaders leading to burnout is their perspective. So a bit sour on their past experience, unfortunately. How can I secure a role at a good company, whatever that means? I know now I need to know AI and network like crazy, but what other useful tips, advice, tricks do you have, Reddit community? So interesting one. I think anyone parts ways or gets let go from somewhere that they feel is quite toxic is probably had a bit of a poor experience and is obviously looking to move on. But like, what do you think, Rowan? I'd love to hand over to you on sort of how someone should approach hiring who wants to kind of let's go up into maybe a scale up or something like, or even a corporate environment if they've been in a startup.
Yeah, I think like starting with the word toxic, I think it's a really easy word to throw around, and it kind of carries no weight or meaning because every business is slightly different. And I think I've put out content which is one person's toxic is another person's thriving environment. What might be kind of quite feel micromanagey or handholdy might just be the support and the guidance that an individual needs to flourish. If you apply it to sales, what might feel like high KPIs, ultra high dialing, might just be the kind of the focus that a salesperson needs and really values that kind of constant on their case and the recognition of success. So I always find toxic interesting, especially when applied to a startup who are, in most cases, going to be in a state of flux as to what they want to achieve, what the person needs to do, what their next objective is, and therefore what the remit of the role is going to be.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Rowan. I think that the word that came to me when I read that was the word fit. Are you actually, I mean, this isn't to diminish that individual's experience, maybe it was a negative experience, but quite often when I've hired individuals into an early stage business, what I've really focused on during that interview process is, what's the fit in terms of the cultural fit, the environment, because some people thrive in ambiguity. You just used that word thrive, and some people love that and they want to have their role constantly changing, and that isn't necessarily down to poor leadership. That's just the nature of the beast, and we've talked about it before with other guests as well. And I think people often come into early stage thinking they'll bring their experience from more robust frameworks and bring them in, and it just doesn't work like that sometimes.
No, absolutely that. It is very much a case of, and I think there's both sides to it. Two sides to every story. I imagine there are some things that the individual could have done as due diligence before pursuing the role, accepting the offer. That there may well have been things they could have done once in the role that could have increased their chances of retaining, and the business maybe could have operated differently. I'm sure there are things that could have happened that are different, but it's down to both parties to understand if this is the right fit and not just jump at it because it is a good salary, a good job title, it's remote, it's not hybrid. There are so many things to consider, and there is a big difference between working for an established business and working for a just getting off the ground startup with regards to expectation, and that can be a real kick in the butt, or if you're not ready for it.
And there's also a different type of pressure on the founders as well. For some of them, there's a real impact on their personal sort of financial situation in terms of, maybe they are taking a risk, have left a corporate business, have come and building an idea, and it's very personal to them. And that can translate into some negativity if there's stress and pressure involved as well. And I think trying to understand that context and sort of understand the people in the organisation and what's going on with them is really important as well.
Yeah, I think also just expectations, isn't it? It's like when if you're in a startup world and the founder decides to hire someone who isn't from that world, they're more sort of corporate. They're probably, we've said this before in other podcasts, I think I've heard people say, "Oh, we don't do it like that. We didn't do it like that at my company," and it's like, well, you're not there anymore. It's a very different environment, like early stage startup, right? Like you guys said, it's very in flux, very dynamic. There's a lot going on. There's probably a lot of stress, and it's a bit of a different kind of fish. So for that person, I think just probably trying to they said network like crazy. All those things I think is the right thing, but just make sure they're finding a role that fits their expectations, and they're not going to walk into something where they may feel in a toxic environment, whether they are or not they aren't, right? So.
Yeah, I think they've identified that maybe the startup world isn't for them. They want a bit more stability, a bit more consistency and a structure around them. Cool. They've said need to learn AI, and And like, honestly, within a startup, you probably do need to be a bit AI savvy, because finding ways to optimize process is going to be part of what you're trying to do, and that is really going to help the business push on. Whereas if you join a more established business, you've probably got someone looking at AI implementation and tech support. So, you don't need to be as wide thinking in a more established business, crudely speaking, when it comes to performing your role, because there are supportive functions around you. So they might have learned the lesson. It's just been a bit of a pain.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And just elephant in the room, we haven't even talked about your arcade machine behind you. I can't believe I didn't mention that. In our preamble before this, I didn't even talk about it then. So that
It
looks
is,
great.
what is it? It's currently running through the Lion King, so it is like a 701 arcade machine. It was actually a birthday present, but bringing it into the office made total sense, and slowly working through some what turns out very, very difficult 80s and 90s games that offer very little margin for error. So it kind of just
Love it.
plays its own thing. So it'll probably at some point it will change games, I think. But yeah, I think I've completed Lion King, so that's one I have completed. There's that, there's Jungle Book, and there's Aladdin, and those are the three kind of games I remember from my childhood that I jumped straight on to complete. And
The muscle memory is there. You know exactly how to
yeah,
win.
it's
and
really
level up.
not. It took me so long. There's a lot of frustrated slamming and turning it off and deciding I'd rather do work instead. So yeah, it turns out I was better as a kid than I was as an adult.
Nice, nice. Okay, cool. Well, great. Well, let's. I think we'll move on to the main portion of the podcast today. So I'll hand over to the wonderful Deborah Knight. I think she'll go through our normal icebreaker, which can be fraught with risk if we if we ask one that confuses you. But I think this is going to be a good one today. And then
Yeah.
Deb will jump into the
Well,
interview portion. So.
we touched on earlier the heat that we are experiencing in the UK today. So I was going to ask you, Ren, what's keeping you cold? What refreshment are you enjoying? I'm going to be controversial and say I actually just had a cup of tea. I know it's a ridiculous temperature outside, but I still actually find a cup of tea is refreshing. But perhaps you've got something that's a bit cooler to keep you warm and refresh you.
So I
Keep you
did
warm,
have a
sorry,
coffee
keep
this
you
morning,
cool.
hot coffee, much to my displeasure, but I am definitely an iced coffee guy.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of coffee shops not far from us, like kind of in a bit of a square, so it's good to get an iced coffee. And lucky enough to have an ice cream van that's currently popping up. So my ice cream of choice was a Solero, the exotic flavour, the orange one. So if anyone,
Oh, nice. So
yeah,
if you disappear, we've just got to give you a few minutes to
yeah,
come
if you
back.
hear a
Sort of
jingle in
thing.
the background and I suddenly run off screen, one of two things has happened. The light is likely to flick off in the office, gets on a timer, so at some point I'm going to be plunged into darkness. But if you hear a jingle, then I'm off to get Soleros.
Nice.
Okay.
Very nice.
I had a call sort of last night with a US colleague, and I'd gone to get a zero alcohol beer, a Lucky Saint, which is famously zero alcohol. But I realised obviously I haven't got alcohol in it, but I was drinking it, and I was like, oh, I better not make it look like I'm drinking beer on a late night call. But they are very refreshing. So
I
uh,
think it's socially acceptable. If it's late night your end, it's
yeah, exactly, I think so. But got a bit funny about it.
And the World Cup's on,
It was
so
very
it's expected. Yeah.
cool.
Okay. Brilliant, thanks, Ryan. Well, so we'll dive into the topic, and as Mike said, you've got that experience of talking with the hiring side as well as talking with the candidate side. So I think exploring both those sides will be really interesting. But I'm interested to kind of just start with the hiring manager in those sort of early scale up sort of stages that perhaps haven't had a CS leader before or haven't got a CS leader. When they say they're hiring a new head of CS, how often is that actually what they're hiring for, and what do they actually usually mean they need?
yeah. I would say it's probably 50-50, but a lot of people don't need a head of customer success. What they actually want is someone to lead customer success, and the two aren't necessarily the same. It really depends where they're at with their journey. So, it's even trickier in current market because so many people are out there looking for roles. You could put a CSM role out and get lots of heads of applying because they're seeking employment. You could put a head of out and get some people that are senior CSMs that are ready for the next jump. So there's a lot of to and fro. But I think someone looking for a head of CS needs strategy and leadership, and that might not be where the business is at. I think most first hires are actually just a capable CSM that can start building, but is ready to be hands-on and be hands-on with clients, not start building processes, playbooks, training plans, QBR decks and all that. It doesn't need to be that complex. But every business is different, and that's probably the underlying factor here.
Yeah, and I think sometimes I've seen sort of the word sort of strategy used in those types of job descriptions, and building out the function and things like that, and that probably does come later down the line, but there's often a more immediate thing around getting your hands dirty and doing probably some firefighting and building of relationships and things like that. Do you see a real split between different sort of types of businesses and different sectors, or is it quite, you just mentioned there, it does depend on the business, but do you sometimes see that people need somebody really commercial, or maybe somebody more technical or process driven? Like, do you see different themes?
Yeah, there is definitely a split. I think more businesses are leaning towards commercial, and if you're bringing in your first CSR or second, you want someone that can kind of tread both paths. So you do want someone that is very relationship savvy, but it doesn't make sense not to find someone that's commercial because they're so close to the client, probably the closest to the client. You want someone that can start driving revenue and create uplift, assuming, and this is a big thing, assuming your platform enables you to do that. If it is a single solution platform, where's the uplift coming from? If it's a user-based model when your target market or your user base is quite small, like there's only so much uplift you can do. If you work with if it's a recruitment tech platform, you're reliant on the recruitment agencies using your solution to grow in seat, and that doesn't happen quickly. You can't expect someone to suddenly just double the seat usage if the client base isn't going to double. So I think every business really needs to understand where they are with their kind of client base and where they are with their proposition, their solution, because that will typically dictate the individual you need, whether you need someone that is very upsell centric. If you're on 3-year cycles, do you need someone that's hot on retention and renewal? Probably not at this point. You just need someone that can really focus on adoption, usage, engagement, value proposition. And then if you've got quite a technical platform, then maybe there is value in having someone that is a bit API savvy, has worked in development, has a bit of coding experience, always worked in tech support, so they can be a bit more of a technical agent and consultant to a client when they're using some of the more complex parts of the platform. So again, it comes down to knowing your product and your client base probably dictates what you need to push your customer journey forwards.
And what role do you play in that? Do you work with your customers to kind of help them scope that a bit, or do you find that they tend to need to go away and answer that for themselves?
Oh, I think it's a bit of both. Like, we position ourselves as consultants because we are not here, like, respectfully to just do as our clients say. We're here to help them get the outcome they want, and the two aren't necessarily the same. If someone comes to us and says, I want to hire a head of customer success, we'll understand, well, talk us through your book of business, number of clients, how big's the customer success team, where you want to be in a year's time, what's the growth ambition, talk us through the platform. And we might say, I just think, like, for the budget you want to spend, you could probably get a head of. What you're not going to get is someone that is actually enjoying doing what they're doing, because you're not giving them a head of customer success role. What you want is an IC person. So the positioning is aligning the role to market expectation, and then kind of doing the inverse when we're speaking to candidates, which is being very transparent with the candidates about what this role is. If we're calling head of customer success, look, honestly, Debs, first 12 months, you're going to be looking after clients hands-on. Consider yourself an IC CSM, but within 12 months, we expect hiring, probably a CSE, for example, but you're then going to start stepping away from day-to-day, handing over client base and looking more at strategic stuff. So the roadmap's there for head of customer success, fingers crossed. But this is what 12 months looks like. Now, if that excites you, great. If it doesn't, it's not the role for you, and off we go. So we're there to consult both sides. Make sure the client is positioned to find the right individual to push business forward, but at the same time, make sure candidates, to take this individual example that went to the startup, to make sure candidates are walking into a situation they fully understand, there's nothing hidden and expectations are set from day one, and day one being my conversation with them, not day one of walking into the office.
Yeah. I really like that partnership approach. Do you think that LinkedIn content that founders or hiring managers are coming across is is shaping what they think they need versus their reality.
Yeah, and I don't think it's for the better necessarily. So I think LinkedIn and perhaps its algorithm can often promote what people want to hear and what's topical, and that's not always what's correct. There might be a post out there around, why are people leaning towards people that have sector experience when there's great CSMs out there that don't have sector experience. And it's a valid point, and I don't disagree with that. There are great CSMs that could work and be super sector agnostic. But if you as an ed tech could find an ex-teacher that has used your platform and then moved into software, like how valuable is that? Not to you as an employer, but to your customers. If as a CSM you can say, look, I've been there, totally get it. It is a pain in the ass, but here's what we're actually doing to resolve what I know you're facing. So, you don't have to have sector experience to fit into a sector role, but the value is very important if you can identify it.
And question I had, Rowan, is like, with the sort of changes over the last couple of years, with companies having to be more profitable and not just growth, and profitable growth, and therefore maybe the knock-on effect it's had with an AI, with reductions in force and the amount of people in the market, all these sort of things, economic factors. Like, have you seen like job descriptions from companies hiring, certainly earlier stage ones, like when they're hiring, are they more specific around what they want now, or are they? Do you find that the candidates find they're still a bit too general? Like, are people going into these interviews and roles, and like, I wonder if that's changed at all, like because of the amount of people in the market? Like,
I think there are good and bad examples. I would say in the general, I think companies are getting better at starting to align what they're looking for. Now, whether it's clear in the job spec or not is another matter, but the depth we go to when we're looking at a job is really in the detail. We want, like, there's what's in the job spec, and there's, look, now tell us what you need beyond the job spec, and we'll find that individual. But no, I think companies are getting better at positioning kind of the skill sets they want. It might be enterprise, it might be SMB, it might be mid. We're seeing a lot of scaled digital tech touch one-to-many CSM roles out at the moment, because people are looking at how they can apply scaled engagement, digital engagement, and not even just to their long tail, but perhaps to middle spending accounts, but to enable mass engagement, webinars and online video training, that type of thing. Like, can we do this at scale? But no, companies are definitely getting better at creating a more specific job spec, or utilising pre-qualification questions or ATS pre-screening to try and mitigate some of the burden of qualification they'd have to do otherwise.
I think it's a really interesting point around how when you went into customer success a few years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, it was quite a wide role, but also quite manageable. And I think that lots has changed since then, and there's now sort of a need to the remit has expanded, but not necessarily in a good way, and there's a need to kind of specialize, like you're mentioning there. But at what point do you try to get breadth across your CV of saying, right, I've had exposure to mid-market enterprise and now I'm doing scale, but what point do you have to really, as a candidate, say, this, I'm going to specialize here, because otherwise I've not got a specialty that I'm going after?
Yeah, I don't think you need to, is the honest answer. I think having the breadth of experience is great. It means you're applicable to lots of roles. It's not the CV that often stops people being considered for roles. It's how they approach the application process that I think is the problem. If I was a CSM and had SMB, mid-market and enterprise experience, I'd probably have 3 CVs, where I just emphasize in my headline and maybe reduce some of the written content around the other roles. So if I'm applying for enterprise, I might just have less about my SMB and mid-market roles, and then just emphasize enterprise. But as I'm applying, it's the message I send to the hiring manager. So if I was applying for a role that you're advertising, Debs, and I've sent my CV through the application process, great. But I'm now sending you a message which is just going to bullet 3 or 4 reasons why my CV really aligns to what you're looking for. So if you are enterprise, if you are mid-market, if you are SMB, I'm going to emphasize that. If it's a 2 million book of business, 1 million, 400k average order values, can I touch on those points? Do you need someone that's used Gainsight, Plan Hat, Vitally? Cool, I've used them. I worked on Churn Zero implementation within my current business and created the best practice plan across our CSM team. So the CV is kind of a snapshot, but if I can very quickly establish the value, and not my perceived value, but what you perceive as value, because the two are different. What I think is
Yeah.
important doesn't matter. What you think is important matters. And if I can position that in a very concise message and get your attention, that is a big battle won.
And is AI helping people to do that, or is it coming across too obviously that it's AI? Because there's a balance, isn't there, of, if you're looking for a role, I need to sort of tailor and be bespoke to those roles that I'm really interested in, but there's also a necessity to try and have a lot of reach, I guess, with the current climate and stuff. So where's the right way of using AI in all of this as a candidate?
I think using it to support what you're trying to achieve, but not doing it. I think that's the main thing. I think too many people are reliant on AI to do, and that removes some of the thinking. And do the thinking for AI, let AI optimize it. So, an example might be, cool, I've seen the job. I can use Claude or ChatGPT or your AI solution of choice to share a link to the website, share a link to the job spec, and share my CV. Look, help me build 3 really key bullets based on my experience versus what they're looking for in the JD and versus what the platform does. And then type it your own way, make it human.
Yeah.
There are tells, but I've seen a post from a contact who said that they had 100 applications for a job. And in the job application, there was a question about, talk me through how you might approach this. And he said we had something like 16 identical word-for-word responses because AI had given the same answer based on screening the job, the website, and the question. So word for word with maybe a few full stops, commas, and capital letters, but otherwise an identical answer. And basically he picked them out because they clearly just not applied a bit of central thinking.
That's interesting. And I'm picking up on something you mentioned earlier about digital and scale. So you mentioned that sort of becoming more of interest to hiring managers. And I get why, right? Like you say, they kind of be able to do things at scale. But I've always found that I think people find that, the kind of the career ladder, let's say, in customer success usually goes up towards enterprise, right? You kind of the rather than the one to many, you kind of moving up the chain and maybe getting paid more experience, you become an enterprise one. But actually, I'm wondering if it's sort of going to turn a bit, and actually, like the value of people that understand some of the technical agentic sort of elements of digital scaled customer success. I wonder if that's going to become almost more of a value to companies, right? Than like just kind of normal enterprise strategic CSM. So I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Good point, actually. I think it's a more niche skill set. So, and that's not to underplay anything that enterprise CSMs do, the way they are strategically connected to their clients. Like, what they do is fantastic. There is definitely a skill set when it comes to digital engagement, tech touch, one-to-many. Like managing a webinar of 40, 50 people is a very different game to speaking on a one-to-one basis. Creating content and sharing it, there is a creative element to this as well. Understanding how you can really utilize Gainsight or any CSP of your choice, whether it be Churn Zero, whether it be Plan Hat. So there is definitely a skill set that is desirable, and like I said, we're working multiple roles of that nature, and I have no doubt that I could put an enterprise CSM into a scaled CS role and they would manage parts of it very, very effectively. But 2 problems. 1, genuine fit. Are they going to enjoy not being as close to their clients by doing a scaled role? And do they genuinely understand how to effectively deliver this activity and how to effectively utilize Gainsight, how to effectively use Plan Hat, plug it in with HubSpot, use AI? So there are 2 different skill sets, and you are right. I think the traditional journey would be SMB, mid-market enterprise, similar to sales and account execs usually start SMB and build yourself up. I do think they'll level out because the desire for someone that's genuinely capable of delivering digital or scaled CS engagement is much rarer at this point in time than an enterprise CSM who can do that.
Yeah, we've got we're inviting a guest actually, hopefully in a couple of weeks, onto the podcast called James, who's does digital customer success at Read Online, and him and a couple of other people were on an online panel we did for the community a while back, and it's probably one of our most attended ones. So I think CS leaders often are CS leaders of enterprise CSM teams, and and everyone's, including me, I think, a bit less familiar with that world of that sort of. It's more of a kind of technical marketing sort of one-to-many motions programs. Like it's different, right? So I think yeah, I'm interested to see how that develops.
Yeah, it's a far more data-centric kind of approach. It is a bit of data, a bit of marketing. Like, what can we tell about these guys from a kind of sweeping, high-level perspective? You know, you're not as close to every single one, so it's fundamentally different. You know, you're looking at different metrics. You know, how do you understand adoption and usage at scale, and then where can you prioritize your time? Because you still got to check in with these guys, still talking to them. It's not completely disattached, but how do you prioritize your time and identify where your time needs to be allocated is a different skill set to every week being very, very intrinsically close to your client base.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we talk a lot about how customer success is becoming a commercial role. I mean, I personally think it should always have been a commercial role, because commercial doesn't necessarily mean negotiating. It means thinking about whether you're delivering value and how you're demonstrating that value. But we're also talking here about, you know, operating scale portfolios and digital tech tools. Where do you think sort of the sector, or that the function of customer success is going in the future, if that's not too big a question?
I mean, it's a big question. I
All
see,
of the podcast.
yeah, I see it blending. I think you've had this kind of sales CS account managers split before. I just think they'll come closer and closer together. I mean, there's a case that CS and account managers become a very almost an identical overlap, and I think it will come down to the type of business. You know, if you've got a really, really complex project, long sales renewal cycle, then do you want your CSM constantly eyeballing that across 10, 20 accounts? It's too much time away from strategy, and therefore an account manager makes sense. But they've got to work close together. If it's a much smaller solution with the renewal cycle shorter, then I don't think you necessarily need an account manager. So I think those two roles will become closer and blend. I think we'll see casualties both sides of that. You know, some account managers that are maybe a bit too transactional will find themselves either having to pursue a more transactional role or maybe not being involved in that kind of strategic blend, and CSMs that are not commercially savvy enough, and again, I don't mean salesy, just commercially savvy, will find themselves, and some have found themselves, fall foul of reducing teams where kind of desire for commercial expertise is wanted.
And you know, you mentioned that there's a lot of people available on the market due to the changes. What would you say to a candidate that's sort of saying, I think I've fallen out of love with customer success. I don't really know why or what to do next, but like, how can they see, because I think customer success has got lots of skill sets across it, but if they were thinking about maybe trying something else, or trying to fall back in love with customer success again, sort of what advice would you offer them?
Yeah, I think an honest conversation with themselves about why it didn't work. I think a lot of people don't want to be self-critical, but understand kind of what you didn't like. You know, did you not like working with the product team because you found that frustrating because product and technical work a very certain way and you're just not good at communicating that information to and fro? So maybe you need a simpler product where you don't get involved with the product team. People that don't like the commercial element, I guess that's kind of tough a little bit, because I think CS is sales by default. It's just not new business sales. But if you didn't enjoy the commercial aspect, are there roles out there where you won't carry that? And it's kind of down.
So I think like what you're sort of saying there is actually there are so many different types of customer success roles in different types of businesses, that it's about being sort of really reflective internally to understand what it is that you enjoy and what products you can connect with and what your skills are, to see if you can find other CS roles maybe that align better to those
I think
things.
Look at CS as a function, not that's the way to do it, because if you think about it, customer success is driving successful customer outcome, which sounds really simple, but what contributes to that? You've got onboarding, you've got implementation, you've got customer success, you've got support, you've got product, you've got training. Like, there's so many roles within customer success as a journey that you might not like the day-to-day accountability of being taking the first bullet when the client's not happy, even though you love the successful outcomes. So maybe onboarding and training is where your time is. I love getting on and training and showing people how to use it. You know, there are adoption specialist roles, which is just, you're not responsible for the client's success, but you are there to help them utilize the product properly. So I think there are so many roles within the customer success journey. Genuinely understand what you didn't like and then what you did like, and there's probably a role in that space somewhere for you, but it is then down to you to identify it and then create a fit for it, where you can really position your expertise accordingly.
Ask you about how do people, what does success look like? What makes people stick and thrive? Which I think is probably a good place to finish. Is there anything that you wanted me to bring up that we haven't yet?
I think from a candidate perspective, I just think I got asked a question recently. What's the difference between a 50 and a 60k CSM? And the honest answer is nothing when it comes to the job, but everything when it comes to the habits and the behaviours. And I would say that makes a big difference. So, for 50 or 60k, you can get a decently competent CSM that's probably looked after £1 million worth of book, 20 to 40 accounts, has owned renewals, retention, upsell, worked in Martech, FinTech, HR Tech, choose your own subsector. On paper and based on capability, they've driven the same net revenue retention. They've done the same thing. What I think makes a candidate stand out to me is how they engage, proactivity, response and reaction. And examples might be, firstly, how they come across on the phone call initially. Do they show kind of smart, intelligent questions? Do they challenge me on my screening? Once you get to the process, how quickly do they respond to me? How quickly do they respond to interview requests? Do they reply to invites from the client saying, look, looking forward to meeting you, can't wait? Do they follow up to interviews saying, great to meet you, really, really pleased. Here's the slides that I talked you through, look forward to hearing back. I've set myself a reminder just to follow up, but you did say it'll be a week, so I won't be on your case. I just think there's lots of little things an individual can do that just shows how they would operate. And a hiring manager's job is to assess an individual throughout the interview process, but that interview process isn't just 3 1-hour video calls. It's from first engagement to first day of working. Use that. And I guess the flip side to clients is, the candidate experience through the interview is what enables them to form an opinion of what it's going to be like to be an employee. So just as much as you judge a candidate based on how they interact with you, they're doing the same to you as a potential employer. So, make sure your process is slick, don't leave emails late, don't leave too much time between stages, provide feedback and, ensure the candidate journey is something you'd be happy to go through.
And on that, I think that Mike mentioned at the very start about AI in the hiring process, and we've touched on how candidates can use AI to help them to do the application or to support them in the application, but not do the application. What are some sort of good wins for AI during for the hiring manager side, and what are some key watch outs during that process?
I think a hiring manager can use AI to create almost look, what are my key things I'm looking for here, and are there people that are coming through that are aligned to that? Away from the job spec, are there things I need this individual to achieve, and are there examples in their CVs where they suggest they've done that? So I think it is a helpful administration reduction tool. AI can really speed up the time it takes to look at information and turn it into something that is far more tangible to a hiring manager. So absolutely use it for that. It can be a bit simple. It can really remove great candidates from a process because it doesn't see keywords. But I think hiring managers can really take advantage of, look at these profiles and CVs and tell me if there's things that show they can evidence these bits that maybe aren't job spec relevant. And then I think from an interview perspective, I think AI does a great job of digesting information shared. Calls like this can be recorded now. It's hard to remember everything and take notes whilst listening. So like call recording software and summarizing notes, I think that's a great way to be cool. They touched on some key topics, even creating the topics before. So AI is actually allocating response to some key things and maybe doing some scoring metric.
And how do you feel about, I haven't done this and I haven't seen it either, but you're saying that's just making me think we spend a lot of time, getting coaching feedback, people watching our calls, getting coaching back on that, but nobody's giving us that feedback on interviews. So is there a world where the candidate records the calls from their side and then they kind of look back and reflect and or is that just a bit of a step too far?
I mean, actually, we've had some candidates ask about interviews and if they can get a recording for it. So it makes sense. Why wouldn't you want to understand how you appeared to the other individual? Were you slouched a little bit, sat a bit wonky donkey? Did you look disengaged despite the fact you were totally engaged in the conversation? Did your face portray that? We use it. Like sales people use it. Calls are recorded in sales and then assessed and reviewed. It's been done for years. There's no reason, if you can get it while having a copy of your interview, wouldn't be beneficial to you to understand how you looked to the receiving manager.
Also, I had a question. I think when hiring managers interview people and they do a couple of interviews where they decide that they don't want to move forward with that person, do you ever get feedback from candidates saying that they didn't receive very good they didn't receive feedback from the people that kicked them out of the process? Or do you find employers are actually do try and give constructive sort of feedback and criticism, or do they just not hear very much? Is it like crickets because that person wasn't the right fit and they moved on to the next one? Like, what's your kind of experience from the candidates side?
I think it depends on the stage. First stage, maybe second. If it's let's say call it a 4-stage process, stage 1, it might be volume interviews, and I don't necessarily, they'll get an automated response. Great to meet you. I don't think you're right for the role. No additional feedback. Stage 2 and 3, mixed bag. But really, if someone's gone to the time of creating any form of content, presentation, prep for an interview, they should be getting feedback. Now, we'll do our best to ensure that all feedback's passed on and try and get as much as we can from our clients, because it's really valuable and I think it's only fair. They've invested time. It's perfectly right to get that feedback. But I think it depends on the stage. There is a lot of auto-rejection. So what AO does poorly is auto-reject. There is an auto-reject setup, and that doesn't help anyone. No. But at the same time, volume of applicants for anyone given role is so high, I don't think there's a real consistent workaround. It's, unfortunately, there's going to be give and take on both sides of this, and sometimes candidates are going to feel the pain of the process, and sometimes hiring managers are, and I don't think there's a happy medium there sometimes.
And also, I think it's difficult with the hiring manager. I used to be hiring managers from that perspective, when sometimes it's not their experience or even their skills. It's sort of, you don't feel like they would be a good fit as a person, or their attitude, or I don't know. That can feel a bit more brutal for a hiring manager to tell someone that,
Like the chemistry.
It can not brutal. Just feels, I don't know. It can be more an uncomfortable conversation, which is maybe why they don't. But that's probably the reason they didn't move forward, right? Maybe.
It's going to exist. What we started with was fit. So there is an element of cultural alignment just isn't there. And, not to point any individual out, but if the team, the CS team is quite young, all London-based, the rope's fully remote, but they're all London-based, they're quite social, they go out on a Thursday and Friday, and it's part of the kind of team dynamic. If you've got someone that can't make that work, however compelling they are for the role, that does impact their alignment. Not saying they couldn't do the job, but are they going to enjoy it as much from a social? Are they going to feel as connected to the team, or are they going to feel a bit outside of that function? So cultural alignment is critically important. Not more so then, but equally so to the technical alignment to a role, because you spend 8 hours, 9 hours a day doing this and working with these people, whether in person or digitally. You need to be able to connect to them, and if you don't, it doesn't make you feel good about it, and it might not make the others feel good about it.
And if someone is a bad cultural fit, it stands out. I think you can tell. It's like they feel different from the other people in the office. I think you can see it. So, cool. Well, awesome. We could probably wrap up. I just wanted to make a point to listeners who are watching. Rowan didn't decide to turn his camera off. We had a bit of a technical issue where I think maybe the laptop overheated or something. Anyway, we've got audio, if you've noticed that, but we've had some great content over the last sort of 5-10 minutes. So apologies for not seeing Rowan's face for the last bit, but it's been great having you on. Thanks for some great questions as well, Deb. It was really interesting.
Yeah, great to have you on, Ron, and it's really interesting to get your insights and perspective, and really like all the content that you put out there as well. So it's been fab having you on. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on, guys. Really appreciate it.
I just want to say, if you are, if you are a hiring manager or you are a candidate and you're looking for a role in the customer success world, ABR Talent's got a great reputation. A lot of people that I know in the CS world talk about Luke and Rowan that sort of lead the ABR Talent bit. So I recommend using them if you're hiring or looking to be hired. So yeah, great talking to you as always, Rowan.
Appreciate it.
And we'll speak again soon.
Will do.
Thanks
Cheers,
a lot,
guys.
Cheers.
Cheers,
Bye.
bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Customer Success from the Ground Up podcast with me, Mike Marshall.
And me, Deborah Knight. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to like and follow, and we'll see you on the next one.